Hello, and I guess this is the third video. And this is going to be like a series of videos here. The other device that I was using ran out of space, the memory. Like I filled it with it had so many videos in it. It ran out of space, so the thing wouldn't record anymore. So I had to switch devices to this old pad that I'm using now. So forgive that the quality of the video is not as good as the other one, because this is a very old pad that I'm using now. This pad is on its last legs. It's like the screen is scratched, whatever. It's like a really old pad, but it still records. It's just the quality of the video is not going to be as good as the other one. Anyhow, I'm reviewing the interview that Al from the Al-Luya show on a radio station that used to be called Radioactive San Diego, which no longer exists, conducted with Barry Swicker. And Barry Swicker is the man who wrote the book Towers of Deception, the media cover-up of 9/11, which was like the Bible of the 9/11 truth movement, right? It became the Bible of the 9/11 truth movement. There were other books, but Barry Swicker's was the most comprehensive and read, one of the most comprehensive and most read books. And this interview was conducted on August 16, 2006. So I'm just gonna, as in the previous two videos, we're just gonna listen, and then I'm gonna pause and comment.
Psychology. Now, and I'm glad you mentioned Ken Jenkins, because Ken and I are good friends, and we have dialogues about all sorts of stuff. And he has been one of the earliest ones to send me a very friendly criticism about Chapter 3, which is about denial and psychology. It's titled 9/11 Truth is Hidden in Plain Sight, 2001 Tricks for Avoiding the Obvious. And I think Ken has, this is what I was looking for on my email when before the program started, is to look for the exchange that Ken and I had. And I think he made a very valid point. He said he likes the book, but he said he was disappointed that there's not enough attention well, he was talking actually about Chapter 5, about the shame of Noam Chomsky and the left gatekeepers. But so I have to correct myself. He was talking about Chapter 5. And he said he was disappointed that there wasn't enough attention paid to the fact that people in the left media and in left organizations are perfectly capable of being blindsided by denial, by fear, by the usual rationalizations to which us human beings can fall victim to. And I think he was right in that criticism. I told him, I said, it's unfortunate. I didn't mean to leave the impression that people on the left are not human beings who have the usual failings that we all have, where we tend to accept the first story we hear, and then our left brain rationalizes to back that story up, even if it's obviously baloney, right. Steven Pinker calls. And also we figured out a way, and Ken has already agreed with me today in an email. I said it would be so easy for me to fix that chapter, because all I would have to do, and I think I'll do it if there's a second edition, I will do it if there's a second edition, is to say that all the typical pitfalls of us human beings to rationalize and deny apply to these people in the left media. Yeah. And they are fully explored in Chapter 3. That's all I had to say.
Right.
Yeah, and I think I already commented on this on a previous video, unless it got caught or whatever, it wasn't recorded right. But I said about this issue of left media, Noam Chomsky was instrumental in using his influence in left media to promote the marginalization of the 9/11 truth viewpoint among the left. Left media in Canada, the United States, and Europe pretty much marginalized 9/11 truth. And, so, and I'm talking about the non-Marxist left media, they marginalized 9/11 truth. The only place you could find 9/11 truth material was on indie media, maybe. And, in there, you got to be careful, because sometimes they deleted some outlandish stuff, So, yeah. And, left media, the reason, other than the influence of Noam Chomsky, the one reason why the non-Marxist left media sort of like marginalized the 9/11 truth viewpoint is because they were afraid of the implications of the 9/11 truth viewpoint, and they were afraid. A lot of them were afraid. They didn't want to dwell too much on, what the 9/11 truth movement was saying, and they didn't want to go there. They didn't want to go down that road because then it would have forced them to confront certain realities about the system that they didn't want to confront. They were protecting their sanity, maybe, or like their sense of security, perhaps, because it is safe. It is safe to like be ignorant sometimes. It feels good when you are safe being ignorant. It feels good, and you'd rather be ignorant and safe than find out things or be confronted with viewpoints and facts and ideas that would sort of like challenge the narrative of the worldview you have, in a way that it would like alter things too much. So that's what I think.
But it's a good point.
Well, and it's interesting too, because you break down the what happens on the inside of a person when these horrific things happen. It infantilizes the American consciousness, so that we then need the daddy figure of Bush and whoever to tell us that, these bad people are out there and we're going to keep you safe, and don't worry, little child, you'll be fine. Your daddy's here. And
yeah,
it's really important. It's to know, to see that, and get some perspective on that process.
Well, I think so. I myself have been very, I don't know why. My mother had problems with depression, and she had a lot of psychosomatic illness. I mean, I loved her dearly, but as a child, I became aware on some level of my mother's difficulties, and perhaps that which was what led me to become interested in psychology. And I remember around the age of 12, in the newspaper, there was just a single, it was on the comic page of all places, a single panel called Mirror of Your Mind. It was quite well done. They packed quite a message into each one of those panels. I remember reading those as a kid. And of course, in university, I took psychology, was very interested in it, and I followed it ever since. Subscribed to Psychology Today for a long time, but it's become a really downstream thing. There's nothing much in it anymore.
Yeah.
But and as a social activist all my life, I kept running into all these excuses that people trot out to poo-poo that we're in danger from nuclear proliferation, to poo-poo that there's anything called global warming and everything. So I've been up against this in a very practical way all my life, where people find all these excuses for not looking at things, not believing in things, looking at them but looking away, saying, well, you're right, but I'm not going to do anything about it,
right.
Which ultimately you hope that people will see things that are very important to the lives of themselves, their children, and the planet, and furthermore, they will decide to do something about it, because if we don't get enough people who do something about it, we're really cooked. And fortunately...
Yeah, I wanted to comment here real quick about this whole issue of, doing something about it. Okay, and the non-Marxist left, Barry Swicker pointed out, just a snapshot of the mentality in the non-Marxist left. Like the non-Marxist left, they say, that the two main problems, the two main dangers facing humanity today are, the danger of nuclear war and the effects of climate change, right? So so from the perspective of the non-Marxist left, the most important movements now would be the anti-nuclear movement, the nuclear disarmament movement, both the anti-nuclear / nuclear disarmament movement and Extinction Rebellion, right? Those, from the perspective of the non-Marxist left now, those two would be the main movements that we should follow. So it's such now, and it was back then too, except back then there was no Extinction Rebellion. Back then there was other things like Earth First or whatever. But it was, same principle, different tactics, different people, but same principle. And I think Noam Chomsky popularized this idea of that the two main problems facing humanity are nuclear war and environmental catastrophe in the book Hegemony or Survival. I'm pretty sure it was that book, but yeah. And he talks about, Barry Zucker talks about doing something about it. What was the strategy of the 9/11 Truth Movement? They like, it was really interesting. They were very eclectic. Like, they held conferences, they had demonstrations, they held a lot of like educational events trying to educate the public. They put out, back then, DVDs. They put out, all sorts of online stuff, information, websites and stuff. A lot of activity in forums and etc. online. Yeah. But the problem with the 9/11 Truth Movement, though, is that the alternative to the official story, which is the 9/11 Commission report, were a plethora of theories that some of them were completely outlandish and some of them were like downright reactionary. Like this theory that I really did not like, that was seized on by the neo-Nazi far right, that the Israeli Mossad had been behind the 9/11 attacks, and that they provoked them in order to provoke the United States to attack Muslims. That story behind it was like an anti-Semitic hatred element of it to it. So what I mean. So yeah, the 9/11 Truth Movement, like the first wave of it or whatever, their tactics, I don't know. For what I hear now, the last remnants of the Truth Movement, and in the link to the description, I'm going to put a link to a documentary from 2021 about the efforts of a group of people to try to get a new investigation going, by like people, the last remnants of the Truth Movement, I would call them. They are like still struggling to get a new investigation or whatever. That's what's going on now. So I guess if you are a sympathizer of 9/11 Truth, or you're curious about 9/11 Truth, I guess you would support those people that are trying to get a new investigation going on now. And there's a link in the description. There is a link to a documentary from 2021 about that, about people who are engaged now in 2022. I guess in the 20-year anniversary was in September 11, 2021. So there is still activity right now, 9/11 Truth activity, but it's not like a movement or whatever, like trying to expose the government or whatever. It's more like just the families of people who were lost trying to get a new investigation going. Hey, that's okay. It's not it's not like an anti-establishment, anti-government movement or whatever, but hey, at least it's something. These people they're motivated by the fact that they have, still have feelings for their loved ones who were lost or whatever. So yeah.
More and more people are concerned about these things, and increasing numbers of them are doing something about it. But this week, I'm so glad I have chapter 3, which delves into the psychology. And when I was researching that chapter, I found that things were even worse than I had thought, even after a lifetime of studying this on and off. And what really was alarming was some new information. I'm not sure whether I can find it here in the book as we're speaking. But you might recall, if you as you did read the book, that when we just as humans, this is something that's common to us all. This is now proven to my satisfaction by neurophysiological research on the brain. We now have so many ways to read what the brain is doing. We can look at the electrical activity. We can look at the blood flow. We can look at the temperature.
Right.
And we have MRIs and fMRIs and CAT scans and PET scans, and so this to me has replaced philosophy as a major incision point into reality. And what has been found lately is that when people were wired up and they were presented with information that they didn't like, that was contrary to their existing worldview, when they rejected that information, even though they knew that information was valid, when they just rejected it, that's rather perverse that we would do that, and I'm afraid to one extent or another, all of us do it from time to time, and some of us do it all the time. But the really, really frightening thing is that as people reject information they simply don't like, the pleasure centers of their brains light up. And the cognitive part, the rational part of the brain is almost dead. So we are not rational beings, and I think that in any important subject, we have to pay attention to that and take it into account as best we can.
Yeah, I just actually looked up the link that you provided for that story in the index. I looked it up. It was on NewYorkTimes.com, and I gave it because I was, I engage in online discussions with people, and one of these guys just loves just to discount me automatically. So I said, well, I'm not going to enable. Are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I guess we're getting a call in on the line. My call waiting is beeping. But so I gave him a link, and I was like, I'm not going to be your enabler anymore, So just suffice to say that 9/11 was an inside job, and I'm not going to, I'm not going to be your cocaine fix anymore,
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been through that situation. Like I said in another video about when I was involved with the Ralph Nader presidential campaign as an online volunteer or whatever, as an online promoter, brand ambassador or whatever you want to call it, like in 2004, right? And I was like online, like promoting Ralph Nader, vote for Ralph Nader or whatever. I was living in Europe. I wasn't living in the United States, but I was like supporting the movement, like the Ralph Nader presidential campaign or whatever. And I got all sorts of flack. I mean, I got flagged left and right. I mean, I got vitriol hurled at me by Kerry supporters, that I am an agent of Bush. I vote for Nader as I vote for Bush. I am actually a neoconservative agent. I mean, all sorts of stuff, and even more personal attacks, personal insults from the supporters of John Kerry, because the Kerry campaign was a cult. I mean, if you look at the branding of the Kerry campaign, Kerry, seized on Kerry, the way out, Kerry, he's going to overthrow Bush and take the troops out of Iraq. It was crazy. They created a cult around the Kerry, not even the face of Kerry, not even John Kerry, the person. It was like the word Kerry. They created a cult about that, and if you went up against that like sacred image or whatever, like you were pummeled, because people's like whatever, like what Al and Barry Zucker are discussing, their pleasure centers lit up. They got off, beating down the Ralph Nader supporters. So I've been through this. I've been through what they're talking about. And people in the 9/11 Truth movement also went through that, from the neoconservatives and the non-Marxist left. And I don't know what the Marxist left was doing, but the non-Marxist left and the neoconservatives both pummeled on 9/11 Truth. And Noam Chomsky was involved in that. Noam Chomsky also opposed Ralph Nader in 2004, by the way, but that's another story.
That is really amazing, and I think that really is what fuels a lot of people's active resistance. Is they get a charge out of being a professional debunker, being someone who likes to call BS on things, like that Penn and Teller guys, on their TV show, that they got a show called Bullshit, and that's their. So I'd like to just jump ahead to another chapter on Chomsky. At the very beginning, there's a quote that you gave of his. It says that he said to you, to your face, "Look, this is just a conspiracy theory."
That's right.
And then I'd like you to tell us a little bit about that encounter. But first, I want to give this other quote to back it up. This is Chomsky's quote. He says, "Conspiracy theories has become a four-letter word. It's something that people say when they don't want you to think about what's really going on. And then for him to say, look, this is just a conspiracy theory, when you asked him, I guess, directly about 9/11?
I did.
It's kind of...
No, it's remarkable, and I think that I'm providing a pretty decent service in articulating this and detailing it, revealing it, and discussing it.
Mm-hmm.
I've interviewed Noam Chomsky 3 times for television. I had my own television show. I was on Canadian TV for 15 years on a particular channel, Vision TV. And so then I got my own show, and I did three segments, I should say. Actually, no. I did 5 segments on Chomsky, which arose from 3 interviews in different years. And the last time I interviewed him was in November of 2002. And this was in Hamilton, Ontario. And he had come to give the Bertrand Russell Memorial Lecture. And by the way, just an aside here, I hope I don't digress too much. You can stop me if I do. But
I just want to mention, Noam Chomsky again. I want to make this disclaimer. I personally, I follow the work of Noam Chomsky. Or I used to, not anymore. In the period of 2005, 4, 5, 6, he was against Ralph Nader and against 9/11 Truth. So I didn't, I started to I'm starting to get angry, upset with Noam Chomsky. But the Noam Chomsky that I like is the Noam Chomsky that was the young Noam Chomsky back in the 1968 to 1973 upsurge in context of the anti-Vietnam War movement. Noam Chomsky articulated left communism and left communism, dissident Marxism. So he combined it with anarcho-syndicalism, but because like I said in another video, the Amsterdam International did not survive World War II, and neither and the POUM and the Nin didn't survive the Spanish Civil War. So Noam Chomsky single-handedly revived, the left communist version of dissident Marxism in context of the anti-Vietnam War movement, and I think that was good. The young Noam Chomsky, but the Noam Chomsky that came later, I don't know. Whatever.
my main hero is Bertrand Russell, and I'm a member of the Bertrand Russell Society. I subscribe to the journal Russell, and so here he was giving the Bertrand Russell Memorial Lecture at McMaster University, where the Russell archives reside. And he gave this talk, and you know what? It was a standard Chomsky talk. Now it's got, there's a lot of good stuff in a standard Chomsky talk about Guatemala and East Timor and so on. But he didn't even mention Russell's name until the very last sentence. And then he said something like, well, this is the kind of thing that Bertrand Russell would want to look at. It was extremely disappointing. He had put no work into it, into actually delivering the goods at that memorial lecture. Now, I know he's busy and everything, so I can cut him some slack, but really, it's very seldom that someone gives a memorial lecture and blows it that badly. But anyway, I was there to hear the lecture, of course, and I was there to interview him for Vision TV. And I believe there were 3 subjects. And so one had to do with faith, his religious upbringing, his faith, and what part that plays in his life. And then there was something about current affairs. I forget what was going on at the time, Haiti probably. And then the third thing was 9/11, which I saved to the last. Because in journalism, you never lead off with something that is going to be, a problem for your interviewee.
Right.
And what I actually did was I created, I printed out on an 8.5 by 11 sheet, really briefly, my question to him. And I don't have it in front of me, but it was something like, which you'd be familiar with and which we've partly discussed already in this program, something like this: in light of the fact that not a single U.S. jet interceptor turned a wheel until it was too late on 9/11, and insofar as George Bush went on reading a story about a pet goat for at least 8 minutes after he was told America's under attack, and I just gave 3 things. Then I said, what is your view of these anomalies? This is essentially, and I put it in front of him as courtesy, before the camera was rolling. And so he just took this piece of paper. It had, 125 words. Took this piece of paper, and as long as it takes me to tell you that, he just tossed it aside and he said, "This is just conspiracy theory." It's the quote that I have in chapter 5. And then he went on in a very energetic way to, in fact, I was going to have this, I was going to have in the book about the things he said. I had a whole deconstruction of them, and finally, you have stuff in a book, and it's in and it's out, and it's in and it's out.
Right.
I'll tell you what, this went out. Here's what he said to me. He said, "Look, you can make a conspiracy about anything." He said, "Really, just try it." This is trademark Chomsky. Really, just try it. You've heard him say that.
Yeah.
He said, "Look, you can have a car accident in a corner, and you can spin a conspiracy theory about it.
Right.
Really, just try it." Now, his wife was with him, and allegedly he was tired and pressured, and I knew I made the very correct decision. It was no time to actually have a debate with Noam Chomsky.
Yeah.
Because Carol was saying, "Look, he's got to go. And he was just going at me that this is just conspiracy theory, and saying just an ordinary fender bender can be turned into conspiracy. And I just basically had to listen, thank him for his time, say, "Carol, you're right. He's got to prepare for the lecture tonight." And that was the end of the encounter. Now, when I stopped and looked at it, it was one of the most ludicrous things you can imagine. I just decided to look into a fender bender. Now, supposing
This is important.
that you went down to your local police station and you wanted to look at the police blotter, and you said, "Look, when's the latest fender bender you had?" And they say, "Well, it was at 3:43 this afternoon at Maple and 3rd Street."
Uh-huh.
And you looked into it. And let us suppose, let us suppose you look into this very particular one, not a theoretical one. And when you examine it closely, it turns out that one person ran into another deliberately so the other person could collect insurance.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a conspiracy going between them.
Okay.
Well, let's assume that.
Right.
Okay, but would that mean that every car accident can be made into a conspiracy? Of course not.
That's a really good thought exercise there. Conspiracy, right? Because Noam Chomsky's premise is that you can weave a conspiracy theory out of anything, right? Noam Chomsky is whatever. Yeah, in a way, he's right. If you want to manufacture a conspiracy theory, you can do it. Like now, for example, QAnon, right? Which during the Trump years, QAnon. This guy, they just in the 8chan, chat board or whatever, they manufacture this conspiracy theory with this, whatever the Q messages, and then you have to decipher stuff. But the problem is that different people decipher different things and different interpretations develop, right? It's another story, but yeah. So that's an example. QAnon is an example of what you can create a conspiracy theory out of anything. The difference is though that when you look at the official story of 9/11, when you look at the 9/11 Commission report, there is a lot of problems and omissions and things that don't add up, and then the problem was, of course, that a lot of people went beyond criticizing the 9/11 Commission report, which should have been the focus, should have been just criticizing the 9/11 Commission report and ask for a new investigation, which is what the diehard survivors are doing now, right, in 2022. And there will be a link in the description. In the description, there will be a link to a documentary about that effort going on now in 2021, whatever. But there are factual issues that challenge the sort of 9/11 Commission report, which is the official history of 9/11. It's not a matter of somebody just grabbed something and created a conspiracy theory. That's not it. There is a valid criticism of the official story. Right.
Here you have this world giant intellect dragging out an example, an analogy, a metaphor that falls flat on its face right to begin with.
Well, you can make the theory. It doesn't mean that there's anything validity to the theory.
Well, no, it has to be.
Or any plausibility.
No, it has to be. It has to be a theory. A theory isn't just an opinion. mean,
Right.
every theory is based on a certain amount of evidence.
Oh, I see.
And,
Okay.
and what you hope is that the theory explains more of that evidence than any other theory. And then as more evidence comes out, you change your mind, say, no, the theory I believed in doesn't cover it. This new theory covers even more of the evidence. I mean, theory and evidence are always in play with each other.
Right.
You know, theory is not opinion. Theory is a scenario that fits the evidence, or the person who believes it or promotes it claims in his or her opinion that this scenario is best explained by these facts.
I see.
And these facts best fit into this scenario. So it's ludicrous. But here's another thing. Supposing that every car accident was a conspiracy, then would that mean that 9/11 was not? So it falls down logically there.
Right.
The thing is, what he said to me was so incredibly, pathetically, logically flawed that it even like a 5-year-old would barely have the nerve to try to pull that off. And what I realized is that there's something wrong, deeply, deeply wrong. It's not that he's not intelligent. It's not that he's not well informed. It's not that he's not passionate. But there's something that is way, way off base. And as I looked more and more into Chomsky, I became more and more alarmed and angry, actually. And that's what my 15,000-word chapter says.
Yeah, it's a really, I think it's a very measured when it comes right down to it. You acknowledge the strengths that Chomsky does have, his valuable contributions that he's given to the anti-imperialism and human rights and justice on the planet, and then there's a disconnect for Chomsky somewhere along the way, and his evasion of the evidence and unoriginal arguments to try to back up his refusal to look at the evidence makes me start theorizing about why he would then, what comes up. Why doesn't he? You'd think that this would be open season for him. It would be easy pickings.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is one thing, Noam Chomsky, like if you look at his the most important book that Noam Chomsky ever wrote was Manufacturing Consent. That book is, right on. Like, I've read it twice. I mean, that book is right on. And I'm going to put a link in the description to it so you can find it. Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky. I mean, up until then, that was 1986 when he published that. I would say that up until 1986, Noam Chomsky was okay. But after, in the 90s and 2000s, Noam Chomsky, he used to, whenever one of the attacks that the right or detractors of Noam Chomsky used to throw at him is that he was a conspiracy theorist, what he would reply is that what Al quoted, that conspiracy theory is what people tell you when they don't want to look at the facts or whatever. It's a way of defending yourself from information that will trigger cognitive dissonance. It's stuff that you don't want to dwell on, right? Because it affects a person's sense of identity is tied to their values. So when you are confronted with information that contradicts your values or that threatens your values, you defend your sense of sanity is based on that. So your sense of identity, you react in a hostile way, in a hostile manner to the information you don't like that contradicts your values because you're trying to protect your sense of identity. So Noam Chomsky, when he would reply conspiracy theory, when people charge you with conspiracy theory, they don't want to see what's going on. That's, I think, what he meant. But then what happens is that when the 9/11 Truth Movement was, when the Ralph Nader presidential campaign, and then the 9/11 Truth Movement happened, Noam Chomsky came out against both viscerally, and he started denouncing. He sort of flip-flopped on his conspiracy theory perspective or whatever, and started denouncing people of being conspiracy theorists. So he engaged in what his detractors were doing to him against the 9/11 truth movement, and I think that was hypocrite on the part of Noam Chomsky. Yeah.
He has so much influence, and which is given to him. He also seeks it, but it's mainly given to him. And power, intellectual power, as it were, is turned over to him by people who don't question him sufficiently. And so it's in the book. I say that he's an agent of disinformation. Now, there are two phrases that are quite similar, but actually there's an important distinction between them. One is disinformation agent, which implies or connotes that the individual is actually on payroll of the CIA or such. And then there's an agent of disinformation, which is at a further removed from that.
Right.
And but I say he's an agent of disinformation. In other words, he might as well be on the CIA payroll because he's a redirect agent. He's a bait and switch agent. He's an agent who leads people into dead ends. And
what is the bait and switch? Maybe we can get into that. Explain that and how it's used in this context.
Yeah. Bait and switch is an old trick, for instance, that's practiced by con men, and I would say that in a very important respect, Noam Chomsky is a con man. It has a very dark, very negative connotation, but and I say in a certain respect, he's a con man. What a con man does is provides to the victim things that the victim really likes, really buys into, really admires, really values,
right?
Whatever it may be. A con man, sort of has his eye on a rich widow, and so he'll pay a lot of attention to her, and he'll take her out for dinner and wine and dine her and say lovely things about her and learn about her family and take an interest in her family and all. This is all bait. And then after a while, this guy's into her bank account. That's the switch. And so.
Okay, that is very interesting what he just said, the bait and switch thing, which in the modern time is Bernie Sanders and the Swedish Left Party. Bait and switch, right? Bernie Sanders, he will tell you what you want to hear. He will, if you're left-minded, he will tell you what you want to hear. Beautiful things about free healthcare and free education and free that and free this, and the workers, what have you, and the union and this and that. And then after you vote for him, you support him, you join him, Bernie, then he tells you, vote for Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden. So that is what I'm saying. That is what Barry Swicker is talking about, a bait and switch, which is what Bernie Sanders does. And here in Sweden, the left party does, when it's bait and switch. Left-minded people vote for the left party thinking that they're going to, legislate communism into existence or whatever it is. People think that's going to happen when they vote for the left party. I don't know, whatever. And then the left party goes in the parliament. The left party supports the Social Democrats, So, and then they don't do anything about anything else except support the Social Democrats. So the left party is actually a social democratic party that poses as leftist in order to bait and switch, engage in bait and switch, like Bernie Sanders or Noam Chomsky, according to Barry Swicker. I'm not, like I said, I like the young Noam Chomsky. The young Noam Chomsky when he was left communist / anarcho-syndicalist in context of the anti-Vietnam War movement, in context of the Central America Solidarity movement, when he supported the Sandinistas, for example, against the Reagan administration, the Contra War, which was a terrorist war unleashed by the Reagan administration against the Sandinistas, because the Sandinista revolution of 1979 to 1983 overthrew Somoza. And according to the American government, Somoza was a bastard, but he was our bastard. So the Sandinistas took down their bastard. So then Reagan got even by by telling the CIA to launch the Contra War, which was a terrorist war directed against the Sandinistas, right? And Noam Chomsky stood up against that. Noam Chomsky denounced that, and he was, with, so, and also, in Central America, other places in Central America, atrocities that happened, in Guatemala and in El Salvador, whatever. And then he wrote Manufacturing Consent in 1986, right? And so I guess between 1968 and 1986, I love Noam Chomsky. But after 1986, this side of the 90s, Noam Chomsky has gone, and now he's a liberal social democrat. In his retirement, he's like a liberal social democrat, Master Yoda or whatever. And it's horrible. So yeah, whatever.
You can see bait and switch happening in various aspects of life. Now, with Chomsky, the bait for the left, and this is the same bait that enrages the right. And then paradoxically, because the right attacks Chomsky, the left thinks, well, if the right's attacking him, then he must be good. The enemy of my friend is my enemy, and the friend of my enemy is my friend. So that this polishes his stature on the left, that fanatical rightists attack him so viciously and unfairly, usually. But he just tells the left what they want to hear. The left soaks it up. East Timor, Guatemala, Haiti, and the depredations of the American Empire going back to its earliest times.
Right.
And all this stuff is true. All this stuff is important. All this stuff needs to be said. And he said it very articulately for a long time and repeatedly. So that's a tremendous contribution to general public education about the overall shape of things, which only makes it all the more contradictory and really preposterous that he would fail to see some of the most toxic and pivotal practices of the very power structure that otherwise he so roundly criticizes. Namely, these false flag operations. I have 18 of them in my book, in Chapter 7.
Right.
So he refuses to think that that the state was involved whatsoever in JFK's assassination, or Robert Kennedy's, or Martin Luther King's, or Malcolm X's. He never said anything about Paul Wellstone's plane crash. And of course, the big litmus test is 9/11.
Yeah.
So
Barry Swicker just listed the unspeakable here, right? The history of assassinations in the United States, right? And he forgot, I would add, well, McKinley was killed by an anarchist. That's different. But let's say, the Kennedy assassination, the Robert Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and I have here, I have here my, I'm wearing my Malcolm X and Leon Trotsky buttons, right? These are my favorite buttons, Leon Trotsky and Malcolm X. And I consider Malcolm X to be the anti-Hitler. But, Barry Swicker talks about this history of, assassinations and stuff. And Paul Wellstone, that plane crash, but that's ancient history, is forgotten now, whatever. But back when it happened, some people suggested that maybe the Bush administration was behind it. I don't know, whatever. There's no evidence. It's just whatever. But And there is a short video where I talk about the history of false flag, because one of the things that happened is that in the 2010s, the truth movement evolved into a movement exposing the history of false flag operations, right? And then you have the blowing up of the main warship in Havana Harbor, which led to the Spanish-American War in the 1890s. You have the sinking of the Lusitania in 1915. Which apparently Winston Churchill allowed for it, or let it happen on purpose when he was Lord of the Admiralty. And then you have Pearl Harbor, which the Roosevelt administration knew about it and let it happen, or whatever. Maybe, I don't know. The Gulf of Tonkin incident, where supposedly some North Vietnamese gunboats attacked an American warship, and that was used as the excuse to start the Vietnam War. Before that, in World War II, of course, Operation Canned Goods, which was when Hitler, the Nazis, staged a false attack on a radio station on the Polish border, and they left behind some corpses dressed in Polish uniforms, and they were concentration camp inmates. They killed them, and then they put them in Polish army uniforms and put them on the border and took pictures of them. The Goebbels propaganda ministry took footage or pictures of it or whatever, and they said that the Polish had him attacked at a radio station on the German side of the border, and that was just as an excuse to attack Poland. So that's what Barry Zucker is talking about, the history of false flag. And the truth movement, a section of the truth movement evolved into that, into the exposure and analysis of the history of false flag operations. And there is a really good documentary about this from 2014. I'm gonna try to find it if I find it. I don't know, but I don't know if I can find it. It's what that talks about the history of false flag. If I find it, I'll put a link in the description.
Not only does he refuse to see any government hand,
as well as the election fraud.
And election fraud, thank you. And election fraud. I mean, all this stuff is increasingly evident to millions of Americans. And this famous leftist is autistic. He's blind, but that's the rub. You see, most leftists, and I was one of them for years and years and years, big fan of Chomsky, had 16 of his books, and I was just puzzled by these things.
Yeah.
And I ran into other leftists. Can't figure this out. I'm mystified. I'm puzzled. This is so strange. This is bizarre. How can this be? But then we all just dropped it. We're in denial because we like what he's saying. We're eating debate.
Right.
We're eating debate. We're in denial just as much as a Bushite is in denial about what Bush is doing in Iraq. They'll always find excuses to finally endorse the war in Iraq. And you can see that finally they're so far off of the evidence that it's really quite alarming. And this is what so many on the left have been. I was one of them for so long. We cut him all the slack. We go into denial, and we just say, well, it's just a mystery. Well, I don't think it's a mystery anymore. I think that this is deliberate on his part, and I cannot,
Well, then what's his motivation if it's deliberate?
Well, now this is getting very difficult to deal with on air, because a person can say certain things, believe certain things in a private discussion.
Right.
But on air...
I mean, maybe just in general terms, we could talk about the left. It seems to me there's a couple, that I could just sort of throw out in general, not specifically about the man, Noam Chomsky, but there's fear of losing credibility, fear of, appearing like some kind of whacked out and crazy kook, with kooky ideas. There's actual, being a paid disinformation agent. Fear of losing, and rather than that, then a step below that would possibly be fear of losing funding from the foundations.
Yeah.
Those are the three big ones to me. Or else just pure denial, just straight up psychological denial.
Well, you see, it can't be that.
Right. If it's deliberate.
Yeah, because we're looking at it's deliberate. He's had loads of opportunities. Numerous people have asked him about this, public meetings and broadcasts and everything, and he's been completely consistent. But he's been consistent about JFK all along.
Right.
He wrote that book, Rethinking Camelot, in 1993. We really trashed Kennedy. Didn't have to. And what does this bee he had in his bonnet? About Kennedy. Kennedy was no better than any president. No better than Nixon. No different.
Right.
No different yet than any other president. And
yeah, I want to make a disclaimer here. I don't admire any American president. For me, all the American presidents are whatever, representatives of on that one I defer to the Communist Manifesto or whatever. When it says there that it's a committee for managing the collective affairs of the bourgeoisie. That's what I think the American president is, the presiding actor of such a committee. But the only one exception I make is Benjamin Franklin. He was the only good American president, was Benjamin Franklin. He was a philosopher president, and he was the only good guy in the whole entire history of American presidents. Only Benjamin Franklin was the good one. That's what I think. That's my perspective, my opinion.
This completely disparages, anti-humanistic, disparages the power...
I don't think Kennedy was anything special.
The moral stature that particular leaders, not a great number of them, collectively, but particular leaders have, such as Martin Luther King and JFK, in my opinion, and his brother and others. So all along, he just disparages these people in really a blood-curdling way. And his acolyte, David Barsamian, was in Toronto, I forget the year it was, speaking in the chemistry building at U of T. And it happened to be on the anniversary, very near the anniversary of JFK's assassination. It was around November the 22nd of probably 2003 or 4. And so Barsamian was asked in the question and answer period, what he thought about JFK, because it's the anniversary today or yesterday or the next day. And my skin practically crawled. He said he went into this really anti-JFK diatribe, and it was complete Chomsky all down the line. That JFK was no different than any other. He was probably worse. That he wanted to kill Castro. This is true. And he brought out some things about JFK that probably were true and that are very unfortunate and proper to criticize.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with. I don't know. I don't think that. Okay, I don't agree with killing Castro.